Stepping into 2018, the U.S.-China relationship faces increasing uncertainty and complexity. Political and trade relations between the two largest economies are entering a new chapter that present both opportunities as well as challenges. To provide an overview of the macroeconomic environment and also to share a business perspective of the relationship, I am honored to introduce William Yu, Feng An, and Seamus Jiang. William Yu is an economist here with the UCLA Anderson Forecast, where he focuses on economic modeling and forecasting of the Los Angeles economy. He also conducts research and forecasts on Asian emerging economies, especially China, and their impacts on the U.S. economy. Feng An is the founder and executive director of the U.S.-China Clean Tech Center and is a world-renowned expert in clean transportation, energy technologies, and climate policies. Seamus Jiang is a managing director and co-leader for the U.S.-China cross-border deals at PwC. Please join me in welcoming William Yu, Feng An, and Seamus Jiang.
First of all, let me thank you all to joining us for this wonderful conference. As a global professional service company, PwC has been the proud planting sponsor for the past 6 years, together with our great partner with Cassie Bank. And thanks for Dean Allen and Michael and the Wu family, and make this a real platform for everyone in California to use to discuss Sino-US relations. So I thought at this critical moment of US-China relations, we have some experts here to share their insights and perspective on how we got here, and what's the current status, and what's the outlook for U.S.-China relations, and also the collaboration cross-border. And so with that, I'll introduce Professor Yu.
Hello, everyone. So I'm very honored to present in Wu Conference again. So today I'm going to talk about trade, China's technology progress, and investment in the United States from a macroeconomic perspective. So let's cut to the chase. So what is going on between the United States and China on trade? All right. So over the past month or so, we heard a lot of noises from both sides. All right. One day is bad, the next day is better, and the day after next is getting worse again. So I think eventually only two people will be able to decide the fate of economic relationship between United States and China. And one is President Xi, and the other is President Trump. All right. So it is very encouraging that the other day we heard President Xi talk about China's willingness to open up its market more and change the trade policy and practice on, for example, auto barrier, and intellectual property, and technology transfer. So I think this is very good news. And right away, President Trump responded in a very positive way in this tweet. So right now, I think United States is watching China to see if China really can take real action to do this change, as what President Xi say he's gonna do in this broad forum. Some people say President Trump is very unique, unpredictable, but personally I think he is very predictable on this trade issue because he has been complaining about U.S. trade deficit for past 4 decades, actually, yeah, to believe or not. So let me give you some kind of background why President Trump is so determined to see the change. All right, so this chart shows us the global trade balance, imbalance over the past 2 decades. So on the top panel is the major countries with current account surplus. So we can see this is the trade surplus with the rest of the world as a percentage of US GDP. So we can see the green bar is Germany, and yellow bar is Japan, and the red bar is China. All right. So there are the big three countries with the largest trade surplus. And on the bottom panel is the major countries with trade deficit. As you can see, the blue bar is United States. So United States has been running the trade deficit persistently over the past several decades. Some people say trade deficit is not a problem. All right, I agree. To some degree, if the trade deficit is small, it's not a problem. However, I believe if the trade deficit of a country is over some kind of ratio, for example, 3% of their GDP, it might cause a problem. Let me give you an example. So if you will remember, in 2006 to 2008, as you can see from this chart, there was a surge of the trade imbalance. Okay, for example, on the top, we see the China, Germany, and the OPEC country is a black bar. We see this kind of huge increase. And at the same time, United States trade deficit also increased a lot. So when that happens, it means there are a lot more excess saving, more dollars, more lending, and then eventually bad investment. So we all know it ends up to this global financial crisis. So I think it's legitimate to be concerned about a big portion of the trade deficit, persistent trade deficit, in this case for the United States. So we hope China, along with Japan and Germany, can reduce their trade deficit and also reduce their trade surplus, and then at the same time, United States can reduce its trade deficit. So this is multilateral relationship. So let me give you the bilateral relationship. So this is a major country with trade deficit with the United States. So the red line is China. So we can see right now, the trade deficit with China is 1.9% of US GDP. It's way beyond the second. China alone accounts for half of the trade deficit in the United States. So if we remember in the 80s, actually there was a similar trade tension between United States and Japan. So let's look at this. This blue line represents Japan. Japan's trade deficit with the United States. So in 1985, it was the peak of that ratio. It only peaked at 1.2%. So it's still far lower than the current China's 1.9%. Right. So here I show you on the left is the 20th largest goods of United States imports from China. The top item is cell phone, $70 billion in 2017. And then computer, telecommunication, toys, clothes, furniture, household appliance, shoes, even semiconductor, TV, everything. Yeah, from high tech, medium tech to low tech, everything. So total amount $505 billion. On the right is the 20 largest goods of a United States export to China. The top one is airplane, followed by soybeans and cars. All right. So we can see clearly China is gaining a lot of money from this trade with the United States. This is good. But on the other hand, if trade war happens, China has a lot more to lose because of this kind of imbalanced relationship. Okay, so I heard this question from some people. Say, will China step into the path of Japan's lost decades after the trade tension and compromise with the United States? Because we don't want to do that. China doesn't want to follow that kind of step, right? 0%, 1% for 3 decades. Okay, so personally, I don't think it is likely. Let me explain why. So this is exchange rate of Japanese yen over the past several decades. From 1970 to 1985, Japanese yen appreciated by 50% against US dollars. And then from 1985, we had this famous so-called Plaza Accord. So at that time, Japan was forced to appreciate another 120%. So I believe this is one of the major reasons we see Japan's GDP growth become very slow over the past several decades. So let's see China. This is Chinese yuan. The line going down, it means appreciation because the value represents how much Chinese yuan can be exchanged by $1. So we all know renminbi appreciate since 2005 until today about 31%. Okay, a smaller scale than Japanese yen. All right. So looking forward, does anyone believe Chinese yuan, renminbi will appreciate another 100%? I don't think so, right? Yeah, nobody will predict that. This is impossible. So I don't think China will step into this kind of so-called lost decades. All right. However, China has similar problem to Japan's, which is this kind of rising debt. So I believe if China can manage its debt well, I think it will be able to avoid this kind of lost decades. Not 1%, not 0%. However, based on my prediction, China's economic growth will slow down. And that is not a bad thing. That is a very natural thing. When your economy growing higher, GDP per capita is natural to slow down. So I don't think China should do any kind of a stimulus to kind of boost their GDP growth because it will cause more debt problem in the future. All right, so right now let's talk about China's FDI investment in the United States. It decreased from 45 billion in 2016 to 29 billion in 2017 because of the capital control. Right. Looking forward, I think this kind of FDI will stabilize. All right. However, if we had a trade war, I think that would be a different story. All right. So another question is, what happened to some big Chinese FDI in the United States? For example, we heard a story about the Wanda, Imbalance, and HMA. Why are they selling their assets in the United States, including Los Angeles? Among many reasons, I think the main reason is this. China is trying to mitigate their rising debt and capital flight. Okay, so right now, this kind of so-called debt-based or leverage FDIs are discouraged by the Chinese government. And I think this is the right thing to do. As a result, China's foreign reserve has been stabilized over the past year. So another thorny issue is this. Why did the United States intervene in some Chinese acquisition, especially high-tech industry? All right. So the recent case is United States block Broadcom's takeover of Qualcomm. And the past few days, we heard this United States sanction against ZTE. Okay, I think there are two reasons. Number one is many Chinese companies' technology actually have been improving a lot over the past decade. And right now, they are in this kind of direct competition with the high-tech field with the United States. And that related to the second reason, national security concern. I think it is a legitimate concern for United States to see, for example, this telecommunication product made in China, made by Chinese company. The similar concern is just like China is less likely to open up its domestic, say, social media company to Facebook or any foreign company because the same thing, national security concern, right? So I think it's very difficult for any company, especially Chinese company, to circumvent this kind of national security concern. So we will see this kind of acquisition will be more and more difficult. However, I would say there's a solution to remedy that. I would say is this. China's greenfield FDI actually accounts for only 6% of its total FDI in the United States. So greenfield investment, it means if you come here to do investments from scratch, to build a factory, to build a company, to hire a US educated PhD engineer or even like an MBA here, I think this is very welcome by the United States because you create jobs, American jobs, you contribute to the US GDP growth. So I think this is the way China can do to avoid this kind of tension. So let me give you some evidence of China's compete with the United States on high tech right now. So this is a chart of so-called triadic patent family, total number of the patent family for the top 10 countries in the world. Okay, so what I mean is the same patent got granted by US, Europe, and Japan's patent office. The reason I use this is each country will have different kind of standard to grant their patent toward domestic company individual and foreign company individual. So we cannot compare directly with the domestic patent number. So this is probably it's not a perfect way, but I think it's the better way, because if a patent can get granted by these three major markets, it means the patent should be very good. It's very useful. Yeah, as we can see, this red line is China's patent number. It has been growing dramatically over the past 3 decades. From 80s, almost nothing. Right now, it's number 4 country in the world. Yeah. So this is a really great progress. All right. So conclusions here. So China plays a crucial role to correct the global trade imbalance. So if China can really follow up what President Xi said in Broad Forum to open up its market more, to change its trade practice and policy, I think it will be a wonderful news to the United States and to the world. So let's see. And China's investment in the United States are good. However, the debt-based FDI is risky and not discouraged by Chinese government. All right. So if you try to borrow money in China and invest in the United States, I don't think that is a good way. All right. But if you bring in your own equity investment, I think this is still very good. Okay. Acquisition of U.S. company with high-tech and national security concern will be difficult. Yeah, there's no way about it, whether we like it or not. However, the long-term greenfield FDI, I think, will be still very welcome by the United States company, business environment, and government. And China has made impressive progress on technology and innovation. So I say, why not just like a Japan's company in 80s, Toyota company, they bring in their technology, build a factory here, and sell their cars to the American customer. So I think China can do the same thing, with their competitive advantage here. So finally, I would say, because on this trade issue, personally, I believe President Trump's stance is very clear. So it is President Xi will decide whether we are going to have a trade war or not. Okay? So based on his Broad Forum speech, I think it's very encouraging. And I think the trade compromise is very likely. And we all hope these two largest economies in the world will find a common ground to continue our cooperation. Thank you.
So thank you, William, for this comprehensive and very deep overview and also very entertaining overview. So next I will kind of put Mr. An in this hot seat, talk about some real life experience. Mr. An has been a renowned expert in clean energy and environment and clean transportation field for many, many years, and currently run a think tank, cross-border think tank. And you must have a lot of real life example you can share with us. You and me, similarly, we go back to China quite regularly. And I was there in March. I'm not sure what's your recent trip and what you heard.
Last week.
Last week, oh great. So we have fresh idea here. So what do you have heard, people on the ground in China, when they are they still interested in investing in the US? Any kind of, are they turning more negative? And maybe you can share that.
Yeah, thank you. I think the impacts are still too early to trickle down to the business level. In my field, it's energy and environmental technologies. I think there's a strong I like IT sector and so there's strong U.S.-China collaboration, and there's the Department of Energy grant to work with China, $150 million to promote electric vehicles, green buildings, and the clean coal technologies. So so up to this point, those programs is still ongoing, and so the sector I have been working with, and they still haven't been discouraged by this trade war. I saw the chart, William's chart, about the only surplus of U.S. with China is the auto sector on the oil. I think the president Xi just announced he's going to reduce the tariff for oil import. Right now it's 25%. So that can be the area of growing kind of a balance of auto sector. Also the oil, China import 67% of oil from Middle East, Russia, and other countries. So U.S. is a net energy export, especially for shale gas and shale oil. So that's one area the U.S. can dramatically reduce the trade deficit. So I know there's like you said, there's a lot of kind of shouting match over Beijing and versus Washington. But if you go to the local, in southern China, East Coast China, the people talk about the local business. They don't really talk about the politics. So I think next month there will be a very high-level U.S.-China investment cooperation conference in Guangdong, the number one largest GDP province in China, and so there's going to be high-level events going on. So this impact for trade war does not affect sectors equally. So some sectors actually get benefit, some sectors are get harmed. So I think it's not just about high tech, because most of the trade deficits and supplies actually is in the other very energy and auto sectors. It's also very important. So I think the impact will be mixed, and it's too early to tell how that's going to trickle down to the business level.
Yeah. So what you have heard from this side, from the U.S. side, and are U.S. companies kind of changing their tone as well, or?
Right. Again, I can only speak in the field I'm familiar with is the clean energy and the environmental technology. So there are a lot of needs. China is in a very strong drive to clean up its environment. It's one of the biggest growing field. And I think China needs a lot of environmental technologies from US. And actually in next month, like I mentioned, the US-China Clean Tech Summit will be in Guangzhou. So we recruit 22 US companies to come to China. And so this time actually is easier to recruit US companies than before. And so we are quite surprised that you have to turn down so many applicants, but the company we are working with, most of them are small and medium-sized US companies. And so when we receive a grant, we actually receive a 4 years grant from US Department of Energy, US Department of Commerce, which is to kind of a double export. When Obama, come to power, he pledged to double export. So, we received grants from Commerce Department 4 years in a row to double, to double the export. And so we also receive a lot of matching funds from Chinese cities. They want to be part of those, trade mission and the matchmaking process. So, so far from U.S. side, they are very enthusiastic. They are not hammered by this potential, trade wars. So we haven't really failed any different. Actually, it's more enthusiasm. We feel like even the governmental, Beijing to Washington has, a lot of, shouting match, but local, like governor of California, governor of a lot of different states, they are eager to step up to promote their own business. So that's from China. They get mixed signals. Like Brown basically said when he visited China, he met with Xi Jinping. He said, he signed a bunch of deals with several agencies, several provinces. He said that California kind of going to be the, replace the federal government to take lead. So that's kind of mixed signals.
Yeah, maybe we kind of step back. On the federal level and country level, there's a lot of tension, but at local, municipal level, there's still a lot of incentive to collaborate with each other. right? So I think I concur with what you observed. Surprisingly, this past month, we actually, from the M&A side, we saw a lot of pipelines and proposal opportunity in Hong Kong. There's still a lot of middle market deal being done. Although you don't hear these billion-dollar plus transaction anymore by Chinese investors, but in a lot of these so-called traditional industries or consumer and pharmaceutical, life science, there's tons of transaction and collaboration being done. So, which is very positive sign. We all hope, like Mr. Yu, predict this ends well and it does not turn out to be a trade war. But let's just maybe think about it, the worst case scenario, right? So if this tariff and tension does escalate, I think clean energy is one of the sectors that was so global, and there's the value chain is very long, and there's a lot of technology collaboration. So what do you view if we really go into a full-blown trade war? What's that going to impact?
I think there will be some impacts. I think think about the solar panel tariff. That's been going on for many years. I think there's the Suntech got bankrupt mostly because the European EU countries closed closed the market to Suntech. Also the U.S. raised the tariff. So that's big. Several very large solar company, panel company produced bankrupt. So I don't think it's going to be maybe CTE will go bankrupt, but that's not the end of the world. I think companies go bankrupt from all kinds of reasons. That means that it's always bad. So that could be the problem. And also one sector for U.S.-China collaboration, I think is going to be is electric vehicles. Both countries have wide aspiration for electric cars. Also right now, especially for the autonomous driving, artificial intelligence, now China has made the intelligent transportation as a very key pillar. But to be able to make autonomous driving, you have to employ artificial intelligence. You have to collect big data. Mm-hmm. I think when I was in China, I heard a lot of foreign companies like U.S. big IT companies, they are getting involved in this autonomous driving, like Cisco, IBM.
Right.
They complain that they cannot access to the data in China, because if you want to develop autonomous driving technology in China, you have to be able to access all the data, travel data, mobile data, whatever data. You can collect data and you can access to that data. And right now, the standards like protocols for data collection and sharing was made by MIT. So if you are not part of the system, you are not going to be able to access. So that's really hurt the multinational to develop autonomous driving, self-driving technology in China. So it's the same thing for artificial intelligence. So that can cause a lot of problem. And of course, a lot of Chinese companies set up shops in Silicon Valley. Like with Didi, they have opened office last year, and also the Neo electric car also open, like a Flat Future. So those companies will have hard time to seek collaboration with U.S. companies. Also, if they want to make acquisition and investment, that can run into problem.
Yeah. As we move forward, it's probably going to be more and more difficult for this type of deals getting done. So, Dr. Yu, you kind of mentioned the Japan 80s issues. You have been, observing that for your career. What's different this time? What do you think, between the trade war and Japan had, and maybe we have the next one with, U.S. with China? What's the difference between these two, and what do you predict this will end differently? So.
I would say the difference is Japan is America's ally. So basically, Japan is more likely, more easier to follow what what United States wants, and China is not. So this is why we see this kind of tension continue for a long time. So what happened in 80s is there's a pressure on Japan's export, surging export to United States. So the solution was a lot of car companies like Toyota, Honda, they moved their factory in the United States. They build a car here, they hire American worker and sell the car to American customer. So problem solved. So everybody is happy. So actually the chart I show you about that, actually this is current account surplus of Japan, which is number 2, actually it's higher than China. But if you look at the so-called planned trade surplus, actually Japan is much smaller than current account. There's a slightly difference in terms of definition of a current account surplus and trade account surplus. And one of the difference is your FDI investments return, like a dividend, those kind of things. So Toyota, they're still making the same amount of money, maybe even more. The difference is they are making the car here, selling the car here. So avoid all kinds of trade tension. And if they are doing that, building the car in Japan and selling the car to the United States, that is not so welcome. And I think this is the experience China can learn from. Maybe in the future, really it's not just 1 month, 2 month things. I think this is a long-term structural problem. And I can see this is probably the best straightforward solution, to solve this kind of problem. Ideally, like GM's car should be made in Detroit and shipped to China, right? But this is not what happened, right? Because China say, no, you cannot do that. You build a car in China and then you sell to a Chinese customer. So this is what GM was doing. And I think for other products, probably China need to do the same thing. So you produce your product in the local markets. I think that would be very positive to avoid this kind of escalation of the trade tension.
China have a near 30 million car market. It's hard to imagine, 80% of those $30 million are foreign brands,
Right.
the multinational. So it's hard to imagine they can, ship, export, 25 million cars from US, Europe to China.
Right.
That will solve the trade balance problem.
Yeah,
But
that's
hard
right.
to imagine.
Yeah, but we'll come back to that greenfield idea, right? So I think, like you said, historically it has been only 6%. And looks like we have an opportunity to really increase greenfield as a solution, an alternative, as just direct M&A, right? So I'm not sure whether you hear any of the clients you're talking to bring that up as a kind of discussion point.
So I think it's very interesting. We talk with U.S. embassy in Beijing, also like a U.S. consulate general in Guangdong, and so they have same career people. They've been working in the field for like 15, 20 years. Same people, regardless who is the president, and so the way they work, still the same, but the tone has changed. So right now, when we take delegation to China, they said you have to justify. Those they are going to create a job back to the
US.
By the US. So
Yeah.
that's the only way we can support you because you have to justify that. So again, which means that like the greenfields investment. So I see a lot of I call the equity injection to the US firm. So a lot of the Chinese companies they want to before they want to form joint ventures, the US part want to request the equity injection. So so we see all the success we have seen is just they require cash investment from the China side to invest in their like US based home companies then before they can make commitment to China. So that can solve number one the IP issues because
Right.
if they see cash investment they feel like they're on the same boat. Number two is create jobs, create values for the U.S. companies. So I think that's a very successful way to make. It's not it's not the greenfields investment yet, but it's an equity injection.
Right, more of a collaboration, alliances type of.
So the one example, the one company is the solar, is the battery technology company here in California. They just demand kind of a cash investment from Chinese company before we can move to China.
Yeah, that's very good. I think,
Yeah.
we saw a lot of states and municipal here are really putting really attractive credits, incentive policies, and then try to attract foreign company, not necessarily just Chinese, to come and to set up their shop here. which I think is going to continue for a while maybe, and that's where China can take advantage of and encourage some of the industrial players to come over here, like what Fuyao did, right? So Foxconn is doing in Wisconsin. Maybe there's a supply chain can be moved here. I think unfortunately the supply chain can move from one country to another. It's always a very long kind of process. So we'll need to wait and see what's going to happen. Professor, you already gave us a very high level kind of crystal ball kind of predictions. So maybe Dr. An, you can also give us your guess if you want to bet $100 where this is going. So.
I think the investment from China to US is still going to continue after the big drops because China is not even among the top 5, top 6, and investment countries.
Right.
They're behind South Korea even. So I think, but the blockbuster deal, I think high profile deal, I think that's going to be less and less, but more like substantive. I think collaboration, I think will grow. I think you will see after the big drop from last year, you will see the continued growth of the U.S. Direct investment in China. China invites direct investment to U.S. Also the other way around, maybe not true.
Yeah. Maybe to both of you, any sector kind of you really kind of focus on kind of this is the future sector for U.S.-China investment and collaborations?
Real estate is a big thing in Los Angeles and California. And real estate is something you cannot move around in this globalized world. So I would say real estate in the United States, in big city, big metro, is always a very good investment.
So how about you?
Yeah, I think energy and auto sector. I think I think the U.S. will grow export to China. I think that's going to reduce the trade balance tremendously. I think maybe in the high tech sector you will see more problem, but in other like biomedical and clean tech, clean energy, environmental technology, I think you see the growing potentials.
So I'll kind of add the last word here, right? So on the sector view, I was at the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference in January in San Francisco. There's thousands of Chinese investors and companies out there. I think the pharma life science one will be a really booming sector for collaborations and for various reasons. One is there's capital support from China, trickles through from the government all the way to private equity, VCs, and also there's, fundamentally there's aging population there, and you can't do anything about that. So healthcare cost is going to like the U.S. healthcare cost. So that's the trend, and I think there's talents, right? And I think a lot of Chinese are in pharma life science, working for global pharma life science company anyway in the U.S. And there's a lot of talents can be kind of become the founders and entrepreneurs in this field. So I really looking forward to see that more activity in there. And again, I think coming back to your column charts on the investment, we have this peak in 2016 and kind of dropped in 17. But even at the peak, it's only $40-some billion, right? And versus the whole trade was 300 some. Just the deficit, right? It's a 600 billion number, right? So I think the investment, we are still very early in kind of, I agree with you, it's going to be stabilized, but it will continue to grow. The other thing I think is very important for the audience here and the future leaders, don't get discouraged by like 1 year and 1 month or a tweet or something like that. In the long run, we do view, I think all of us agree, there's a positive trend. And one thing is so powerful is the accumulative operating base for Chinese company here, right? So even 1 year dropped, the growth is not as great as the past, but you still have more Chinese company actually here, right? Year after year. So there's going to be an increasing operating base for Chinese company, just like Japanese company has done in the last 30 years. So I think the future is very bright. I would just leave that as a conclusion. Thank you all.
Thank you.